Hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. For anyone that has not been to one of these Greenfield neighborhood plan meetings before, my name is Brad Sipple. I'm a planner for the city of Fitchburg. I just want to thank everyone for coming. Steve's going to talk a little bit more about where we are in the process, but this is a neighborhood meeting intended to get feedback on some more detailed land use concepts that have come from previous meetings and refinement. But again, I just want to thank everyone for coming. MSA, Brad and Steve are here from MSA, the planners that we hired to develop the Greenfield neighborhood plan for us. And we have sign-in sheets in the back and up here by the map tables, so if everyone could sign in at some point before leaving, that would be great. And I'll just turn it over to Steve now to start the presentation. And we're going to have kind of a dialogue type meeting here. So if there are questions, we just ask that you come to the microphone, but we'll have time for questions throughout the presentation. And then after the presentation, we'll have kind of an open house style format where you can come ask us questions about the maps and provide feedback on the maps as well. So take it away, Steve.
All right. Thank you, Brad. As mentioned, Steve Trellin, I'm the project manager from MSA, and then Brad Viles-Catter is also here. So we'll go over, let's just have a show of hands who's attended some of these meetings on this topic through this process. I guess I should say, who hasn't from this group? Thank you for attending. So I'll just briefly talk about process and purpose, initial review. That's kind of what we've gone through in the past, but then we also want to talk about agrihood concept, which is something new based on some of the feedback we've received so far through this process. And then we'll talk about the future land use categories. If you already looked a little bit, there's some of the poster boards up here with some of those specific policies related to each of the densities that we're talking about. They're on the maps. And then we'll go through the concepts, and we'll go one at a time, and we'll have time to talk about each one. And then, as Brad mentioned, we'll be open house where there's sticky dots where you can put a specific comment on the concepts, positive, negative, issues, concerns, and we'll collect that as we move forward. So a little background again about the purpose of the project. It's establishing preferred land uses, balancing growth, while also considering impacts on the community interests, meet land use, housing, and economic development needs of the city, and position the city for an urban service area amendment to accommodate growth. What is a USA? It's the next slide, but it's basically to allow for urban sanitary growth. So there's a certain boundary that you can extend sanitary, and there's a process to go through to extend it further. And so part of this process will be developing a plan that can support that amendment. But also notable here is in the comp plan is dictated areas that were potential for growth. And you see the Greenfield, and if you look way off to the one side, South Stonor Prairie, on the other side, we're actually working on that one as well through this process. And notably, Fitchburg must build 4,900 housing units by 2040 to keep pace with the current demand and catch up with recent housing shortages. This is an average of 245 units annually. So that's why the comp plan has suggested areas that would be in the next neighborhoods, including Greenfield, and that's why we're going through this process. So I kind of mentioned about this area. You can see the red line. That's the current boundary of the urban service area, and so we're looking at the Greenfield neighborhood, how that may extend as part of that amendment. So I know everyone just sat down just briefly. If you bear with me, if you're willing to stand up, if you're able, I just want to say, how long have you lived in Greenfield? Are you willing? Everyone to stand. If you're in the neighborhood. Greenfield neighborhood, in the study area.
So if you live in the neighborhood, stand up.
Well, Greenfield is different than the neighborhood.
Yeah. I would say within the study area. If we need a map for that, I can back it up.
Does 14 area count?
Sure.
Okay.
We're not stingy here. It could be a little further. So if you've only lived in this area in the last 5 years, then you can sit down. Only 5 years or less.
If you've been here 5 years or longer, longer than 5 years.
You're still standing. Sounds like I didn't drop anyone.
Like the wedding thing.
It is. 10 years, not more than 10 years. Wow. All right. 15? All of you more than 20? We'll stop there. All right. Seems like we have quite a bit of people that have lived there for a while. Thanks for going through that process. So we'll do a brief overview. You've seen these slides if you've been to other tenants, but again, noting that looking at the existing land use, you see half of the area is primarily a single-family neighborhood, with the other half being agricultural farming, open space, or woodlands. Roughly 4 entities own 60% of those, the study area. And so you see those kind of colors breaking out of the areas that are primarily open space, farming. It makes up a good portion of the neighborhood that hasn't been built out. And so that's a factor of any one of those decide to want to develop. That's part of why we're doing this process, is to have some gauge of what land use is compatible with the neighborhood while also can be served by utilities. Previously, we discussed that there's potential of looking at an interchange here. So you can see in that one smaller image where the circles are existing interchanges, and this discussion of somewhere in that middle space, there could be another interchange down the road. When we talk about this process right now, we're talking that likely is at least 20 years out from now, but we've got to start the conversation now, because if it were part of this plan, that impacts what land uses you might want to show there, and also how that may impact traffic surrounding it. So outreach we've already done is public open house at the start. That was with actually both neighborhoods. Then we did stakeholder interviews. We're mostly done with that. We also did a developer focus group, meaning people that work on development specialists. So that could be realtors, brokers, developers. And we kind of presented bubble diagrams that we had previously shown to get some reactions to the marketability of what we're presenting. And that's prior to what we're seeing tonight. We had one meeting with the Greenfield neighborhood, and this is the second one that we're holding tonight. You can see that it was in the neighboring building where we did a little bit more exercise of visioning with imageries for each of the land uses. Upcoming, we have an online survey that will be May 7th, and that'll be open roughly 3 weeks. And that will be based on these concepts that you're looking at today. We'll also have an open house for the general public to also look at these concepts on May 7th. And then we are tentatively working to have a meeting with the community of the whole at the end of May before we start looking at what is the preferred direction for the neighborhood and how can we serve it by utilities, how does it impact traffic, and so that would be the next stage of this process. This entire process is going to run now potentially into 2024 at this point. So we're still at the front end of this. It's still a conversation, and so I'm glad you're here tonight. So we're going to briefly just hit a couple about balanced neighborhoods, which was talked about last time, but a new item is agri-hoods. So typical development is what we call single-use developments. You just have single family, and a lot of times it's the same price point throughout that neighborhood. And then you push the multifamily to the edges along the busier roads. Potentially income-restricted housing gets localized to a certain area. And then you have the pods between the commercial, the business park, jobs, and then the residential. And these are the reasons that that's not been a good practice in the past. And so we want to look at what's called balanced neighborhoods or healthy neighborhoods, where you see diversity, inclusivity, social interaction, and walkability. And as outlined up here, those are some of the elements that we'll be looking at with the arrows through this process, looking for more balanced neighborhoods. The other item is something new that I have not put into a plan, but in conversations with people that have been here in other meetings in the past about what is Fitchburg, the heritage of it, also the desire to still see farmland within the neighborhood and open space, So I don't know if you heard of conservation subdivisions, but this is similar where you cluster residential development, then you leave a lot more space within the neighborhood for that open space and farming. It's a national trend that has been happening as green living throughout the nation. It allows for farmland open space preservation, local access to high quality food and farm goods, promotes agricultural employment, and direct connection to farming community. Is this even happening locally? I can say Troy Gardens in Madison is one example. There's a new development in Middleton called Bell Farms that also is looking to be developed with the same concept. So I want to pause there. Quick information there. This is a time that we could break out and have a question of what I just talked about, especially even this concept. If it's something you like, you're questioning, open to the mic if you want to actually have a comment on that.
Is it on?
Yep.
Okay. Your first or second slide there, we must grow 4,900 houses in the next 15 years. Who says so? What if this area wants to grow slower? What if the high density of these 4,000 something houses maybe should go somewhere else in Fitchburg or somewhere else outside of Fitchburg?
It says. Is it on? Okay. It says we must build 4,900 housing units by 2040 to keep pace with current demand and catch up. It's not a prescription. Yes, and citywide. That's a citywide number.
Regarding the land use, you had a slide, keep moving, yeah, that one. So I like the concept of farmland and housing. I live in this area. You guys want to put a park? The red dot is the river, right? The little.
It's.
This other. Yeah, they have that green area right there. I live there. Have you guys ever been out there and actually seen what it looks like? Because you'll be getting rid of a lot of wildlife. I mean, there's tons of wildlife out there. The cranes are out there. The foxes out there. The deers are out there. You put a cleansed up park in there for the dog people, you just got rid of all the wildlife. Has anyone considered the impact of the wildlife? Because that is an actual beautiful area. People walk around and stop and talk to me about the birds and the wildlife out there. Have you guys done any impact studies on the wildlife?
We have not, but I just want to be clear, what we're looking at right now is existing land use.
Right. But the future one, you have a park there. And I'm like, that probably is not the best use of that land. That should be a farmland and keep it as the river there because of the wildlife.
So when you're looking there, it's park, open space, stormwater preservation of what's in that green. It's not saying it's going to, all this land is dedicated as park.
Right, but where do the cranes understand that? The foxes understand that? Do the deer understand that? Oh, that's what makes the city so nice, is our wildlife is so prevalent. They don't understand those things you're saying. So where are they going to go?
Well, I'll just say that actually the green is suggesting preservation and conservation and no development in that area, which would be to the direction that you're stating.
Well, kind of, sort of. Hold it. Kind of, sort of. I don't want dog parks there. They have plenty of miles to walk. We have dog parks all over the city. We got a dog kennel by us. I mean, don't need that kind of park there, is what I'm trying to get to. If it's just a natural walking park, fine. But I know how the city works. And eventually you'll have a dog park there. And it's like, because you have high density living. Where are we going to walk our dog? Currently, everyone just walks their dogs on the streets, and no one has a problem with it because it's all wildlife. But you're eliminating all that. So that part you're going to be missing. And I'm just saying the indigenous people that lived in this neighborhood for their entire lives are going to go, do they not understand what you're missing here? You know, the Gunlocks used to have a deer farm back there, right, before CDC took it over. But that whole area, mallards, geese, everything is over there, prevalent. So these are the things I'm saying that I live in this area. I don't want those to go away. You're saying we have to move forward anyway. Progress tells us we have to build them out. Well, why do you have to build it here? You know, Whalen Road has plenty of places. Have Gary Gorman sell some of his land. That's all I got to say.
Oh, I think you're beat.
Yeah, I'll take the mic.
Well, I'm. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Women first, sorry.
Okay. I just want to quickly clarify something because we're not even yet onto the two designs that are up first. First is, my name is Elizabeth Thompson. I'm on the steering committee for the Greenfield Neighborhood Plan. There are other members here. Maybe they'll introduce themselves. Our newly elected alder, Nicole Valpadari, is also here today if you want to express your opinions to her. Our mayor is here, or maybe she's just sneaking up. Okay. And I see Alder Bill Chethert here. I don't know how long he's going to stay. But anyway, welcome. And to piggyback onto your question here, on the south side of Greenfield, there is a natural open space area that is being, on the plans, preserved. That dotted line, if I'm correct, that's Murphy Creek, or is that, okay. So what's happening in that general area is there's a lot of wetlands anyway, so it makes it difficult to build housing there. And so what came out of the first meeting is that people wanted preservation of that area. I think that was listened to. It's now going more towards open space concept there. The Gold Park addition is also, a lot of people want that preserved. That is also, I think, maybe could be preserved. I have to look at the, we didn't get much time with the two maps on the tables, so I have no idea. And then a quick aside, when the committee looked at the circle concepts at the meeting in February or March, we said that we wanted lower density towards the southern end. We did not want higher or medium density along that corridor. And also medium high was not even on the table at that point. So somebody has inserted medium high onto these two maps on the tables, and the steering committee has not even looked at that yet. So I just wanted to point that out, okay? Does that help you relieve your anxiety a little bit? Yeah.
Let him develop.
Okay, thank you. Anyways, feel free to comment, ask questions. This is your venue. This is your opportunity to influence what is happening, okay?
Yeah, thank you. And I'll note that we will go through what were the comments on the bubble diagrams and going through each of the concepts. So I was breaking to talk about some of the slides we went through. I don't know if anyone has any comments on the agri-hood, or else we can move forward. I don't know what specific comment you wanted to make right now, if it's to that topic.
As long as there's no ladies one. I'm one of the old boys in Fitchburg. I've watched it go downhill as we get bigger, because now lately we've been going full tilt. One of these days we're going to hit that cement wall. But, you know, if you guys would just get the people that live in that area, in these, whatever that lady says, these committees and stuff, well, it'd be a whole lot easier on you guys to let, you know, the guys that actually live there, not for 10 years, not for 20 years. I've got 65 years there, 84-year-old house. So I'm a resident. But I think we should get the city people out of these committees and get the rural area, the people that live in the rural area, in on these committees, and I think you'd have a whole lot better outlook. And for all those, for the number of people that we got to build houses for, Madison takes care of that pretty good. High-rise apartments. And I even checked in. Dane County says we're not blocking the view of the Capitol, so height does not matter. But if you want to fill in that 4,000, 49,000, 100,000 people, build apartments. I mean, a lot of these kids don't want to have houses. So, I mean, that's what, you know, how you push the population is put them in apartments. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment. I'll say that 4,900 was for city of Fitchburg itself. Every community has a certain amount that is short with Madison being the biggest. So if you wanted the actual number for the whole Dane County, it's quite large. So that is only for the city of Fitchburg. All right, let's talk a little bit about when you're looking at these concepts, what does that land use mean? We mentioned that we brought in agrihoods, which is farmland and open space, which usually covers about 60 to 70% of the land, with the remaining portions for single unit, duplex, triplex, or fourplex, potentially even small multi-unit buildings in some cases, probably not in this neighborhood, but just noting some developments like this really cluster the number of units to take up a lot less land, so that they do have attached housing. But again, I don't think that's suggested as specifically within Greenfield, but then you're averaging about 1 to 3 units per acre when you include that farmland. Then there's low density residential, which is single unit, single family, generally 1/3 acre lots or larger. You can still have duplex, triplex, and fourplex, looking at 2 to 5 units per acre, and this is within what the comp plan has laid out. And then medium density residential is single unit with duplex, triplex, fourplex. You add in that smaller multi-unit building, potentially 16 units or less, and that's where you get up to more of that range of 5 to 9 units per acre. It was already noted that the city has amended their comp plan to allow what is this medium-high density residential, which is 9 to 15. What that does is kind of try to, have you ever heard that catchy term of missing middle? Meaning those type of units, you're not seeing a lot of neighborhoods that are smaller unit buildings that provide, that can fit into neighborhoods but bring a little more density, but it caps it, right? So then you're not having that high density, which has 9 or more, and there's no endpoint. And so it's kind of localizing it to that usage. Then there is the high density, which is 9 and above, which is where you get that medium and larger multi-unit buildings. And again, when I say multi-unit, I know that typically we're talking apartments, what's being built, but it's not supposed to clearly state if it's condo or apartments. In these policies, it's about the mass of the building and the number of units. It's not saying if it's rental or not. Mixed use is also unique in this neighborhood. What we use as the word mixed use means it could be independent, individual multifamily building. It could be a commercial building. It could be a blend of the two. It could be either there's a commercial building separate from the multifamily all in one lot, which is called horizontal mixed use, or your typical, which is the vertical mixed use, where you have that retail on the ground floor and then the units above. So all those are options. It's kind of more of a flexibility, but you are talking about more intensity and more density within that area called neighborhood mixed use. And we use the word neighborhood mixed use to suggest that any commercial really shouldn't, there should be a cap. Right now we have on there is 25,000 square feet. We could talk about reducing it. The idea is that you have a walkable commercial that doesn't get to a scale that is too much for the neighborhood. So just noting there's different kind of business parks. We'll show one concept where it was floated that maybe if there was business park, what is farmland now along the 14 corridor, maybe it's agro-related business park if it were to ever develop beyond farmland. So that's something we'll be talking about. Then again, I would just note that you'll see the green that covers general conservation of open space, includes parks, includes stormwater management, wetlands, all that. So that's all right now, it's all encompassed by green. It's not saying it's going to be all city park. It's suggesting areas that are going to be not developed and left as open space or some amenity for the city and the residents. Also noted, we did have 3 options of bubble diagrams by land use. Notably, option A had no interchange or new collector through the neighborhood. It had no business park land use. Majority of development was to the north, with agri-hood and open space to the south. And if you haven't heard the concept about this moraine park that was on the north end here, we see 3 versions of how that could be incorporated. Option A was closest to what the concept was where it could get up to 1,000 feet wide. And so that's similar to what you see in option A. B, you see that there's an interchange on Irish Lane, a business park along the east with the majority of the residential development north with pockets in the southeast. Squeezed the Marine Park a little bit between development on the north end, while option C showed interchange further north of Irish Lane, connecting to Nobel Drive. So that would be actually connecting to the neighborhood that was developed in years past, is one option to have another east-west from that interchange, relieving it from Irish Lane, that traffic. Business Park was in the northeast, development throughout kind of has the lowest space dedicated to agri-hood and open space on that one. What were the general comments about each of these? You see option A, didn't like that it didn't have an interchange. Some mentioned that. That there was no business park was also a concern with the need that there is within the city for 10, 40 plus acres for each business, and that brings high quality jobs. And so there's a need already for that. And so not having that was a concern. And likely not practical to have such a large swath of land dedicated to this marine park of 1,000-foot wide. Option B was generally preferred, but noting that the commercial likely, which is showed as neighborhood mixed use, but still red, was less likely near Kane, and that was reinforced by the development focus group. Some concerns about the traffic that would then increase on Irish Lane, plus trees impact for expanding that road. Option C, the comments was it was too dense. It was the most dense of the three concepts, especially along the south end of the neighborhood. Some interest in separating the east-west road, removing future traffic from Irish Lane, was noted as a positive consideration. There's definitely some hurdles we mentioned at the steering committee meeting about if you add a crossing, that would require adding a railroad crossing, that typically that would require removing one. And so then the question came back, would that mean Irish Lane would have to lose its through connection? And so that was something we talked about. I'm going to pause. Now, if you have any comments specifically about these three concepts and what you heard about the feedback, that specific, would love to hear it.
Hi, I'm Courtney Odorico. I'm on the advisory committee with some of the folks here in the room. Question about option A, and actually all of them. Why were the areas that are currently in the north part of the neighborhood, which are marked MDR, HDR, why weren't those considered as agri-hood neighborhoods as well?
Partly because it's the most nexus to urban development within the city, and it was proposed in the McGaw neighborhood to the north to have urban development. And so that was primarily the reason why it wasn't the location reviewing of that agri-hood.
One of the things I was reading in the Opportunities for Agriculture plan, which was done by the city of Fitchburg, I think in 2017, talked about the concept of interface between rural sections of Fitchburg and urban sections. And so to my mind, that doesn't really offer interface, but I'm curious if there are good examples of interface, a good way to mesh where this growth is coming with what's here and what's open. I think what I'm hearing at all of these meetings is people are resistant to any growth. And that's really great. I myself am also resistant to growth in this area because it's really a special place. But I think there are ways to feather that kind of growth in to make it less dramatic and less egregious, really. So I haven't really seen, I've seen the concept of agri-hood, but I haven't really seen how that plays out and how that actually, what that would look like and how that could be part of a solution to dealing with that high density stuff that's right to the north of this neighborhood and what we currently have now. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'd be interested in seeing examples of that, maybe in places around the country. We're not the only place that's grappling with development in rural agricultural areas, for sure.
Yep.
So I guess that's my biggest hope, to see better examples of how we make that work. And And just for the record, I'm not a fan of the idea of an interchange at Irish Lane because I think that just blows everything out of the water and completely changes the nature of that part of the city. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm here again. I really don't think the city understands traffic. Traffic was always on Lacey Road, and then they made the road for Sherrill Parkway and stuff like that. Now the people found out Irish Lane is the Autobahn. I've never had so much semis in the last 3 years than I have right now. And the best part of it is I'm waiting for the telephone post to break over on the corner. Semis, buses, and the fire department. To turn on Irish Lane, they have to get on the opposite side of the road and make a wide swing, which means everybody coming down Irish Lane is going to keep on coming. So you guys have messed that up. You lowered the speed limit, so everybody comes out to Irish Lane for the Autobahn. But Irish Lane was never meant for a thoroughfare road. It's a country road. It stops at Fitchburg and M. People use it all the time. Traffic has increased 110%. And they come from Iowa and all over the place, and they come from Stoughton, and nobody wants to run that stupid belt line. But I have 2 oak trees, and I have talked to the state of Wisconsin. They haven't showed up yet. They must be scared of me. But I want my 2 oak trees. If they die, they die. But I don't want Fitchburg screwing up Irish Lane. And when they put in water main, the guys that did the sign, they would go around out into the middle of the road and around. Because if they went where the water main is, they're going to cut some chunks of trunk. Fitchburg should look at trees and the environment. And that's how come I'm always telling Fitchburg. Someone in that area should be on these committees and stuff and sit there and say, no, you can't ruin everything. I mean, you guys can cut down a tree in 2 hours that took 300 years. So Irish Lane is not to be widened because you can't go north and you can't go south. Thank you.
Thank you. And you'll see when we get to one of the concepts in our recent conversations landed on a different east-west street that could relieve some of that pressure that's on Irish Lane. But we'll get to that. But thank you for your comment.
Jerry Lynch.
Oh, sorry.
59 years on Burn Road. One thing you didn't tell them is the state doesn't guarantee that you can put an interchange on Highway 14. So that changes this whole project a lot if you don't have an interchange to 14, because Burn Road, Irish Lane cannot handle traffic, more traffic than what it's already getting. And then if you do put that new interchange in North Irish Lane, where you got to close one of them roads down, that's going to make for even more chaos. And when you talk about putting in a new interchange at North Irish Lane, who's paying the bill for that bridge? Us taxpayers? Or the developer? Or the farmer that's selling the land and making the money?
I would want to ask Brad on thoughts on how that funding would happen, if that's...
We're not at a point where we're discussing who would pay for an interchange. It would likely be the city that would have to pay for a new interchange if there were one to go in. But we're way too early in the process to know that right now.
But part of this would be, if you don't start the conversation now, like I said, it's a 20-year at the earliest point of even actually putting one in. We actually talked to WSDOT, and they said they've never dealt this process of actually talking about where there isn't an issue right now of putting an interchange, and how can that, if we consider one, how can it impact land uses that are being proposed in this plan for if someone does want to develop near where that could potentially be, being proactive to it and considering that. But I intend to work with the city on whatever uses we put around there can survive without an interchange, but also be improved by having one. So,
Because you talk about adding all that traffic, and Burn Road and Irish Lane at rush hours is hard enough to get onto now before you add all these new homes. And the roads are Class B roads, so if you're gonna have some commercial stuff in there and you're gonna start running more trucks on them, your roads are gonna have to be, you got a lot more to this than just hurrying up and let's get this passed and let's have these new developments here. I think this is years down the road before you should really, you're pushing and pushing. I've been to all these meetings and it seems like every time I come to the meeting, you guys kind of got a different plan and trying to sneak something through. Because one thing was third Thursday of every month we're going to have these meetings, and then all of a sudden we sneak in a Monday night meeting. You know, the Greenfield neighborhood. No, the Greenfield neighborhood is not all of us around there. We all consider our own neighborhoods, and then all of a sudden I'm part of a Greenfield neighborhood. Never knew that. That's your assumption of the neighborhood. And then that's why a lot of people ain't here. Well, that didn't affect us. I don't live in Greenfield. That didn't affect, I says, yes, it does. Read the thing. Go to some of the meetings. But you're trying to push something through on the people, and it's not the way to do it. Thank you.
Just want to clarify, the Thursday meetings are the steering committee meetings.
yeah, so when we scoped this, well, as part of the RFP request to consultants, the intention was to have some special meetings with the neighborhood and other public engagement activities that won't line up specifically with the steering committee meeting. It's getting the data and the feedback, which is why we're having this tonight. Yes, the plans have changed because trying to react to some of the comments we're hearing. So you'll see a difference between these bubble diagrams and what you're seeing in these concepts with the amount of open space and even the farming lands that are preserved that wasn't in these bubble diagrams. So they're changing with communication and hearing from the community. I wouldn't say a year and a half process is trying to push it down anyone's throat. We're really trying to kind of hone in on what land use makes sense. And then we are going to take it to the next step, which is to look at traffic and the utilities, how they're impacted. So we feel the land use is important to actually determine how future impacts are going to be on infrastructure. So we're at the part of looking at land use right now. Yes. Oh, yes.
I was just going to answer the question. Mike Zimmerman, I'm the Fitchburg Economic Development Director. For the Lacey Road interchange, we actually utilize tax increment finance as the mechanism to pay for that interchange, both with TID number 4 and TID number 13. So if there's business park land as identified on some of these maps, we would look to use that financing mechanism again to help fund that interchange. And the Lacey Road one took us a good 15 years from kind of the first planning and working with WISDOT, but it's kind of that long-range planning that's important to start to have those conversations now. And I think, as we heard from WISDOT, we're actually taking a proactive approach here in trying to work hand in hand with them for something that would possibly be needed in the future. But to Steve's point, they're also looking at the land uses that could coexist without having an interchange there as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Bill Mincer. I'm on Baidui Trail, which is kind of way off to the side here. But one of the, I've been here long enough that the whole Nine Springs neighborhood was a cornfield when I moved in. There are 900 units there now, something like that, 900 housing units. One of the promises of that neighborhood was that we were going to have commercial that was a lot closer. We were going to have maybe a grocery store, maybe a takeout pizza place, something that would be closer. So they dedicated a bunch of that land use to commercial, and commercial didn't move in. Commercial had no interest in moving there, and they still haven't. So I like the idea of having something, some mixed use, some potential commercial space that we don't have to drive so far to, or that we could even get on a bicycle and get to. But I think the city needs to look at, since they built out that Nine Springs area and it hasn't come in, I don't know why commercial would want to come in to the space you're dedicating here.
It's fair that market has continued changed on retail. And again, these plans are built to be 10, 20 years out horizon. And that's partly why the neighborhood mixed use has that flexibility. We'll have to discuss on any policies related to requiring any kind of commercial to still exist there versus just letting it to be residential. That's all part of the process of determining how strong of a push that needs to be here. Obviously, in that case, an interchange is probably the best push to see any commercial here, but there could be still a small segment that could be a few spaces. But understood, yeah, it's a difficult market.
Does the city want to comment on how it's pushing for commercial in that sort of Lacey Road, Nine Springs area? Is anything coming?
Do you want to use this one?
Sure. Since Mike walked out of the room, I'm just going to take a quick stab at this. So I'm Joyce Fry. I work in the Economic Development Department with Mike Z. And we totally agree with you. We would love to see some commercial over there. However, one challenge that we have as a city is we don't own the land, nor can we force somebody to sell their land or develop their land. So we've been pushing and we've been talking, but one of the challenges for that area is when a retailer comes in and looks for the market and the spending power and the things that can actually drive the business, there's not enough buying power within that. So they look at it's called the trade ring. So they look at either a drive time or a mileage. So with like a grocer's going to look between like 5 and 10 minute drive time because nobody's going to want to go to the grocery store and have their frozen foods thaw out by the time they go home, for example. So they're going to look at, okay, how many rooftops are there to support my business? Then they're also going to look at what's the buying power. So those are some of the things that we have as a challenge until we actually get more rooftops in that area. So I hope that answers your question. And we also need daytime businesses there. We need businesses that are going to drive traffic during the day, not only in the evening with the houses. We have a business over there that has over 100 employees, and they don't have any place to go eat. They have to, bring food carts in or, so it is something we're working on. However, we're just one piece of the puzzle, and we're probably a pretty small piece of the puzzle when you look at, and especially now with construction costs and, supply chains, all the things that we've been experiencing that we're not used to.
Hi, Joe Lynch. I'm on Burn Road. I have two questions. One, this is my first meeting, and could you, or maybe you can't answer this question, how did this plan come together in this area when over on Mulcher Road, Seminole Highway, the Alt, the O'Brien property, the O'Grady property, all that property by a fire station, by a school, by Seminole Highway, how did this area, that Greenfield area, get decided to be instead of that area where you already have sewer, water, service, fire, rescue, and schools?
So that process happened about 15 years ago. It was the future urban development areas is kind of how that was set up, and that was done as part of the comprehensive plan that was adopted, I think, in 2008. And even before that comprehensive plan was adopted, the process to establish those future urban development areas happened, I think, starting in about 2003 and going up to like 2007 before the adoption of the comp plan. There were a lot of factors that went into the selection of the future urban development areas, and I'm not going to remember all of them off the top of my head, and I was not here for that process, but farmland quality was one of those factors. Proximity to the US 14 corridor and proximity to the Fitchburg, Oregon rail line was one of those factors. And I believe when, the area you're talking about over on the west side by Seminole Highway, I believe one of the reasons that was not identified as a future development area was because of the quality of the farmland over there. So that's kind of a long way to answer that question, but Greenfield specifically has even been identified as a future growth area going back to land use plans from the 80s in Fitchburg. So it's been there a while, and the future urban development area process was a part of a years-long, probably 5+ year long process on deciding where Fitchburg's growth would occur. And that was all public process as well.
So right now, you can't change that process that you decided that wasn't going to be urban development, but now we need more urban development, so you will not look at that?
No, not necessarily. If I'm understanding what you're saying, I mean, this area was identified. So let me back up a little bit to the comprehensive plan that set up the future urban development areas to accommodate what at that time was our expected growth through, I think, 2050. And that Greenfield, South Stoner Prairie, McGaw, Northeast Neighborhood, North Stoner Prairie, East Highway 14, and then I can't remember the name of the future urban development area down by the Village of Oregon, but those were kind of the areas that were.
But what I'm asking, you can't change the development over off of the O'Brien property or Lacey property. You can't say, you know what, we already have everything there. We don't need an interchange. You have Seminole Highway.
Right.
And you have all the interchanges right down the road with the new 18151.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that can be changed through a major comprehensive plan amendment or a major comprehensive plan update, and that is something that's on the horizon, is looking at that. So.
Okay, then just one other question. With property right now in Fitchburg up for sale, there's like 9 acres that Fitchburg is already rezoned for housing, and they're asking $4.5 million. So you're talking about these agri-communities? How is a developer going to buy property at $500,000 an acre and then who's going to pay for that agri-bit that's going to be in there? Because you're going to look at a garden that's costing $100,000. Where does that money come from then? How do you develop an agri-community cost-wise?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. It's something we talked about with the development focus group about Bishop's Bay, which we all know about. If you don't know, it's a very pricey area. If you put the infrastructure and you dedicate a lot more to open space, it comes back to the lots. So it's not going to be the most affordable option, or you have to allow for more sections to be like that medium, allow for the attached units to get more units in a localized area to allow for some of that other space to be open. And I will say in the concepts that we're presenting here, some of that's not following exactly agrihood, like you're building an agrihood. It's actually preserving areas that are already currently being farmed. And basically just saying, in this plan, we're not recommending at this time it's seeing any urban development. So I guess it's a balance of there might be a new agrihood piece, but it's really also the idea of just preserving farmland surrounded by the housing, so having that open space. So,
yeah, that was going to be my answer, is that there are alternative ways besides the developer buying the farm and then developing a portion of that. Optimally, the farmer would continue to own the property that's being farmed, or that would go into some type of land trust, or similar to what Dunn has done. You do some type of development right transfer so that the land is preserved at a lower value, so the land is not dedicated to housing and other uses, so it's not going to hit that value of $5 million. It's going to be, closer to what a farmer can afford. And so you'll see a lot of these, the way we've dealt with that concept with the agri-hood is we've placed a lot of the development around the existing farms and assumed that the farm ownership would stay and that those farms would continue to work, and we've preserved about as much space on both of those areas that the minimum area for like a working farm to the best of our ability. And again, this is a long-range plan, so the idea that farming would be an integral part of the neighborhood, and so the neighborhood would work itself around that existing farming footprint.
Thanks, Brad. We'll take one more, and then unless you want to talk on this before the concepts, Jason, too? Sure. Okay.
Ed Kinney, Whalen Road. I'm on the steering committee. I wanted to touch on a couple of questions that were asked. One, just the price and the value of the land. So when you put together a plan and you indicate what kind of density you're going to have in certain areas, that's what drives the value of that land. So if you have land that's going to be extremely high density, it's going to sell for a lot more per acre. So 9 acres at $5 million, you're not going to get that if you're developing lower density. So it's really the planning process that we're all working on here that is really going to kind of determine down the road when this happens what each individual parcel is going to be worth, and they're all going to be different. And obviously, if we're doing an agri-hood somewhere, it's going to be a lot less per acre, than higher density. But that's what the plan would theoretically allow for then. The other thing I just wanted to mention with regard to the planning process that we did about 20 years ago through Planning Commission. I was involved in that. And the quality of the agricultural land was a very, very big factor. The east side of the city does not have that black dirt, that really, really good quality farmland that we've got on the west side. We also wanted to keep some of that open because that area is the groundwater recharge area for our city wells. So you want to make sure that you get enough recharge in that area as well. Probably the biggest factor was transportation. The best north-south transportation that we've got through the city is Highway 14, the rail line, and Highway MM all running in parallel. So the theory behind the comprehensive plan that was put together that we're following, it can be changed, as Brad mentioned, is that you want to develop along the rail corridor, along the 14 and the MM corridor, where you've got those multiple north-south routes, and kind of develop in a linear fashion down toward the village of Oregon. So Greenfield falls within that area, as do another number of other neighborhoods, and that's why the focus has been more on the east side of the city, and why we're moving east and then probably going south from there unless this is all changed. One other thing I wanted to comment on, I thought Jerry Lynch made a very good point that I really agree with strongly. We really don't know that we're going to be able to get this interchange. You look back and as Mike said, well, we got the Lacey Road interchange paid for by the TIF. Well, that was Promega. So, unless we've got something like that, it's going to be really hard to pay for another interchange. And even if you can do it, we don't know that the state's going to allow it. There's not a great distance between Lacey Road and MM, where that comes in there. Yeah, I mean, you can put Irish in between, but that's, it's fairly close. It's kind of like the Conservancy project in DeForest. They really expected to get an interchange between Highway V and Highway 19, and they never got it. It never happened. So they had to completely change what they were doing there because they never got it. So that's what we got to plan for is what if we don't get it? And I know you're kind of addressing that, but I mean, I guess the question that I would have for economic development is, what about the idea, I mean, if we're really looking at B as a possibility, I like A, but if we're looking at B as a possibility, you have that kind of a kidney bean shaped purple area that could be business park. Well, that works if you get the interchange, but we also don't have willing landowners that want to sell it at this point anyhow. So why not kind of leave that open to different possibilities down the road? I mean, maybe it's going to be multifamily, a little denser than other areas. Maybe it's going to be business park. We don't really know. We got to find out whether we're going to be able to get that interchange. And I would just suggest leaving that area very flexible in this plan.
Thank you for the background and the comments. Jason?
I know you want to keep moving, but I'm Jason Valerius. I'm with the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission. And our organization covers basically Dane County, and we have a couple buckets of role and responsibility in the region. One is to create and work to implement a plan for the physical development of the region. And so we did that a few years ago with thousands of people from across the region weighing in on preferences for how our entire region develops and how our communities change and hopefully improve over time. So that's one bucket, and we work on that through conversation and advocacy. It is not a regulatory role at all for us. The other bucket is that we're involved in every time the urban service area extends outward, that process comes through the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, and we are evaluating for compliance with stormwater and water resource protection law at the state level. We are the local entity that checks on that and works to ensure that new development is going to protect water resources. We have been involved in processes periodically over the years that have been very contentious, and that conflict kind of lands at our feet when the public hearing for the urban service area expansion comes to us, and a whole bunch of issues come up that at that stage in the game, we aren't really, we don't have the capacity or the power to address it in any way, and we just become a venue for those things to be aired, but not really having much power to solve them. And so over the past couple of years, we've been having conversations with communities. How can we be part of processes upstream, no pun intended, about how we grow as a region, and so that we can be part of the conversation, hopefully have some influence here and there, consistent with what we've heard from people across the region about what makes for better development and what makes for worse development. So conversation here with the city led to our involvement on the steering committee. So I'm CARPC, usually me, is serving on the steering committee. I think for this area, there's questions, why here, why now? The harder processes that I've seen and been involved in are the processes that are the urban growth processes that are driven by a developer already at the table proposing some specific development. Those are the ones that are, I think, most difficult and least satisfying because the outcome is really driven by the developer. This model of talking about this stuff when there isn't yet a developer at the table is exactly what we would like to see and what we encourage. This is not an easy conversation. In my career, this, I would say, ranks as one of the harder conversations, this particular project around development. You've got this big pocket of existing homes, urban development. You may not think of it as urban, but it is a bunch of homes and streets that was kind of plopped out into the rural area decades ago. And the rest of the city, now it's a city, has been growing out in this direction. From our perspective, looking at the long view, development getting here, more buildings getting here is not a question of if, but when and how. We're certainly not in a hurry to see it happen. We are very encouraged to see, for example, the bus rapid transit system getting approval for a line that could come down into Fitchburg, that could drive more infill, that could take more of those units that the city is looking for in that corridor rather than down here, which would certainly, we think and hope, delay the push for any of this to happen. But eventually, it's going to come, and then it's a question of how. One of the things that we think we've seen, and we know from experience, is very hard to do across the region is greenways, connected green space that don't have regulatory protection, that are protected by choice. And a process like this, a discussion like this, is the right time to be having discussions like that. So that's one of the things that we're looking for in this process is there's this swath of green across the north end of this area that's been talked about for decades in the city. This is the kind of time that is really a decision point. Is that actually achievable, and how? So we're really interested to see how that comes forward. Mostly we're enthused about the process. We recognize that it's hard. I don't envy the consultant and the city sitting in front of you guys having this conversation, because I too recognize how it's hard, but appreciate that we're doing it now.
Thank you, Jason. I think that's actually a good lead into where are we at with the concepts. Some of you might have had a chance to look a little bit before we started this presentation, but I did want to talk through each of them, and then you'll have a chance after this discussion to put additional comments down. And again, there will be a survey as well for this. So what you're seeing here is we're calling Concept 1, it's Concept A. Some key themes is you see that big gray blob on 14, that is interchange potentially there along Irish Lane. Business Park, you see uses to the north of Irish, connecting to what is Hartung's development that's happening south of Lacey. So there will be a road that would cross and connect to that. You see residential areas in the northwest and the northeast, with preservation of farming and suburban residential to the south. So the areas that look kind of gray or almost washed out, that is areas that are suggested as long-term farming or agrihood. You can even see in a couple portions of that how more of a suburban development could be incorporated within those farming areas on the south end, and then to the east of Syene are examples of that, where you cluster that residential, you have more open space, but then what does that mean for the infrastructure costs and paying it back? That's why you do see that orange, the medium density residential along Kane, along that whole stretch, with to the northern end, closer to Irish, getting to that medium high, which is that new category where it's 9 to 15, to even potentially the darker brown, which is 9 and above. And we can talk about in policies how we might cap that potentially, to not just let it be open on the units per acre. Then I touched that in Kane. Also wanted to note that we are connecting to a couple streets within the neighborhood, one to the north, which is a cul-de-sac currently, and then to the south. So those are a couple potential connections to the existing neighborhood that's presented there. You can see we did percentages. There are acres shown on these two maps that are printed here, but you can see that 7-8% is business park, which is BP. Commercial, not even 1%, to the point of like, what is the marketability? Showing a little bit of that. And again, you see that between the rail corridor and Syene, those are homes. Again, the intent of this is say, if it ever were to redevelop and someone wanted to rezone it to something else, what are the options? And so that's where it's saying, ideally, at least in the plan it's shown right now, that's commercial. But it's not suggesting that those homes have to be removed. They could stay there forever. It's just saying if someone were to buy those properties and want to rezone it to something else, right now it's presented as commercial in that triangle space. Just to the east of that, the east of the tracks, it's a hatch. So it shows mostly what you can probably see as business park purple, but it actually is hatched saying that could also be a neighborhood mixed use area. So where you see that yellow circle, that could be a roundabout. It's in the northwest quadrant of that. That could be potentially neighborhood mixed use or business park at this time. Again, if you look at the breakouts of high-density residential to the high/medium density, the MDR to low density, you see that 15% of the medium all the way up to high is what we're looking at, with low-density residential covering a quarter more. So basically, 24% of low density, all other densities only equate to 15% more. So then you're seeing the agri-hood at 21% and open space at 31%. You want to make...
Does this coincide with option B? Is that just as a refined edition of option B?
I believe so. It was kind of a morphing of a concepts that we started at that point. Yes.
Yeah, this would be it would be the closest to the concept B. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I only paused because we've had iterations over the last few weeks as we've refined it to this point. So I want to pause. I want to show the other concept, but I'd rather hear some feedback on this if you're willing to share.
Can I make just a comment?
They're going to require you to go up there, sorry.
Well, I need a pointer to go
Here.
on the map.
I don't know if it will work on the screen, though. Oop. What did I do?
Don't give me that.
What did I do? No, it was just the wrong time that this just went sleepy on me. No, it's not going to work. Oh, don't look at that one.
Hello. Oh, sorry. Hello. So I just want to, you see the Greenfield Park in the middle of the yellow? And then there's that little blue that runs straggly. So like where's Faye? Somewhere here. His land and the land on the left side of Kane, and you get into...
Do you have a cursor that you can point to the same thing on the screen he's talking about?
You can see it, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, so take that down Irish Lane to the west. More. Okay, right about there. All that land drains into Greenfield Park, and then some of it from south of Wayland as well into Greenfield, and that's where that stream, or I guess drainage, runs, and then into and across and down into the business park area. And have you guys considered that waterway? I mean, it makes its way all the way to the lake, and it's not Murphy's. I'm not sure what it's called. Sorry? Swan. Yeah. So is there plans for a greenway corridor that way? I mean, I saw the green swale to the north, and then down along Burn is Murphy's. Is there any sense of keeping crap out of our water that goes into the lakes on that waterway in this plan? That's my question.
It's a fair point of if there needs to be additional stop gaps as you go. As you're seeing quite a bit of green east of the tracks, which we knew there were some water issues there, which helps treat it at that point. But there's a question mark of should there be some portion prior to the park, as you're mentioning, to help that. And I think that's the part of the next level. So I mentioned that we're looking at land use, but then we'll be looking at stormwater with our engineers. I'm not an engineer, but I'm glad to know this information, and we'll definitely bring that forward. Yes?
Well, I'm also not saying that agricultural use is the best. I mean, Canes have their farm on Burn Road where they had a bunch of cows, and then all the manure would run into that waterway. And that's almost could be considered worse than housing in some ways. I go up north, and you've got some pine trees around, and then the farm fields and all that erosion has destroyed some of the lakes up there. So, grassway, just, being smart as a farmer or being smart as a builder or developer or trying to, we can do so much for our lakes, like Wingra, all of them, by being really aware of the watersheds and where they come from. And those all start in the fields where, that light brown, high density, whatever, parking lots running off oil. Maybe that's better than a farm field that's turned over in a heavy spring rain, I don't know, but waterways are essential. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks for the comments. Yes.
I just want to reiterate what this gentleman said. Our house is on the southeast corner of Sain and Irish, and so that blue line is our property line. And we have lived there for 40-some years and seen the increase in the water in that ditch as more homes got built around Greenfield. And unless the water is dealt with south of Fahey's Field, there will be a lot of difficulty. That water has overtopped the roads in that area at least twice since 2008.
Okay. Thank you.
I can touch on something real quick. So as Steve mentioned, the next step is to have the stormwater team look at the individual areas that we've captured here. But each of those green areas, you can see one just to the west of the park. And that is meant to capture roughly about the amount of area you need for that development right to the west and south. There's other areas that are along those wetlands that would be included in the stormwater management. And they're not actually in the wetland or in the buffer area. They're outside of that area. So according to state statutes and so on and so forth, we have to manage the water both in quantity and quality, and that tends to manage with wet and dry basins. And so those would happen within some of those green areas. We've labeled it all open space. But we've left enough there to include the stormwater that would be needed for that. But we will be adjusting that if we haven't included enough area.
But understanding if we're learning that there's existing conditions that suggest it's already an issue, that would be noted to our stormwater engineers as part of their modeling to understand that if it doesn't come out specifically in the model. And so understanding what we're proposing as a potential option is kind of the next step to understand, are we showing enough? We were making estimates as a planning group of percentage of area, but the next level of modeling would determine if we need to increase the open space specifically for that issue.
That lady was saying about her place flooding. Mine does too. Anytime they say I'm going to get 2 inches of water, I get the sump pump out. And I start pumping the water onto the road out of the ditch. Fitchburg does poor on that intersection of Irish Lane and Sain. Now, to control the water, you guys got to go on private property. The big ditch that goes in back of that lady's house is private. Fitchburg won't dig it out. Fitchburg won't help control that water. That water comes around the park and down through there, and it's just garbage when it comes down through. So when you want to control the destiny of Greenfield Park water, you got to do a lot of work with the people that live there, because it goes through their land. And then the other thing is, the road on Irish Lane tips south. Never seen that in my whole life. I've been to, there's 3 other municipalities, and I ask them right out, I says, do you have streets or roads that tip one way only? No. On Irish Lane, there's no water to the north of Irish Lane. I have a full culvert with 2 inches of water. When they say we're getting 2 inches of rain, so I mean, if we're going to develop something, you guys studied this for 20 years. This is what blows my mind. And I've been on vacation now for 3 years, retirement, and I'm blown away that we've been working on this for 20 years. Why not? What are you doing? Why is it now? Because there's a lot of stuff that ain't even being processed. I mean, Syene was just done, and they didn't do nothing for none of the water, runoff water. So, but yeah, I'm baffled that, you Greenfield Park, and then you got a little stream. Well, that's a pretty big stream when you get 2 inches of downpour water, because all that houses up in the Greenfield area runs right in to the culverts. So, thanks.
Thank you. All right, good feedback again. We'll have more chances to talk in person and through the survey, but let's look at the other concept. One of the main themes here is actually looking at, again, the interchange is at Irish. However, you see that it's being pulled to a new east-west street that runs from that interchange to the west. Currently, it's shown to go outside of the neighborhood within this planning area. So you see the hatching, and it comes back to Kane. There's also conversation of maybe that needs to continue even further west, so that completely alleviates some of the traffic that would be on Irish. What that does, again, is looking at removing Irish past. It does extend just past Syene for those existing properties there, but it would not go through the tracks, at least conceptually in here. And so basically your main route then would be to turn onto Syene either north or south. But this new east-west street still connects you further east of the highway, and potentially could extend much further west. And the design and the dedicated right-of-way for that road, this new east-west road, could be designed to manage, proposed in this plan, how that can function. And so that really reduces its impact on Irish. Outside of that, we're also looking at Business Park. It does run north and south of Irish there, again, connecting to Hartung's development to the north, a road connection through there. Then there is a neighborhood mixed use, which is NMU/commercial node along Syene, where you see that pink is neighborhood mixed use, the red again is commercial. Then preservation of farmland is smaller in this versus the concept one. So you are seeing more development on the western edge of the neighborhood with more gridded streets to the south versus what you see in concept one, and still seeing that medium density residential on the west side. Again, that can be designed to be single family up to small multi-family buildings. You can even see that light brown to the north before you get to Irish, and there is an actual alleyway there. So that's showing how it actually, even at that density, it could still be single family. That exists, and I should have mentioned if I go backwards, similar to what you see that medium, that light brown in the northwest quadrant there, those are single family homes that could be within that light brown. It's not always saying that it is multifamily to get that density.
So if you do this, you're closing Irish Lane, correct?
Likely.
So you're messing up with everybody's insurance, because if those become dead ends, the fire department can't get there as fast. And everybody's fire insurance goes up on their house. Insurance is going up screaming high now. And now you're going to cause dead ends that the fire engines get down there, they can't turn around.
The only dead end...
By the way, is barely wide enough for a car and a half. And there's 4 to 6 homes down there. Now you're going to put a fire truck down there? How are they going to get there? They can't go across Irish. They have to go all the way around. That does not make sense. Same thing with the end of Irish Lane. You're going to send them down to the tracks, and it's a dead end. So the 3, 4 houses, the lady that lives on the wedge, all of a sudden the fire truck can't turn around. So are they going to run down there? You don't know. The fire department doesn't know. You're making changes that they can't deal with. Those are big trucks, and they're getting bigger trucks. And now you're going to mess with their insurance, because as soon as the insurance company finds out that the fire truck can't get in there or has to back out, there goes your insurance. I live down on Syene Road. On the last one, this one, I have water problems. I've had water problems for 44 years. I have geysers in my basement. You go like this, go all the way around like this. Everything's uphill and comes through my yard. Now you're going to make it worse. Fitchburg hasn't done as far as fixing the water problem. They wanted to charge us each $1 million to run a pipe down to Murphy Creek to get it out of there. Then they wanted to charge us $1 million each because we're the only ones affected to put a pumping station in. That was another idea. You guys need to think about more than just adding houses in here. The people that live here have a right, and you guys are getting paid by taxpayers, and you're not doing what the taxpayers want, you're doing what the bureaucrats want.
Well, note that the street you're talking about with the 5 homes east of the tracks.
You got right-of-way and raceway.
So if you look closer, and we will be able to, when you get to these maps, that you do extend that road another 300 feet to the north to get to this new east-west street, but it is shown how it connects. So it doesn't, only thing it changes is you got to go 300 feet more to that main road that goes east-west. So that doesn't change that outlook for that street.
4 extra turns.
Depends where you're coming.
Turn on Irish, and you're there. Now
So-
you're going to have to turn on Irish, you're going to have to turn south, you're going to have to turn back, then you're going to have to turn on by the way or raceway.
I believe you would just, on Sayin, turn on this new east-west street, and you turn into that same road that we're talking about. But we can look at it and talk about it more on the maps. So I think that one's been looked at. Yes, the existing homes east of Sayin off Irish would have a brief cul-de-sac to get to their driveways. We haven't designed out how you have the turnaround. There's ways to design that to make that passable by EMS. So we're not at that detail. It's not coming off that far from that intersection. But yes, I am fine even suggesting that the plan says that there's an option for that road to go through, but we're just planning for the realities that likely that crossing may be closed. But that's not a set given, but that's pretty much what we've heard in the past scenarios. You want to add?
Yeah, I just want to add that that's one of the reasons that it's shown on one of these concepts is to get feedback on it and see, what the thoughts of the neighborhood are on that. If it comes back that that's not a preferred option, then maybe the Irish option is better. So that's why we bring multiple concepts forward.
And again, the reason why this came about is the idea that we did hear about Irish having current issues of concern about east-west traffic and what additional development would do to that. This removes a portion of that from Irish Lane. So there's other obviously impacts to that we have to look at. Yes,
Yeah.
comment over here.
Comment about the traffic. The development of Lacey and Sherrill was very much designed to slow down that east-west traffic. That it's pretty clear. Yeah, the roundabouts were put in there because people were racing through on Lacey Road. And when those were put in, more traffic shifted to Irish Lane. It's absolutely clear that there are people trying to get from the east side of Fitchburg to the west side and the west side to the east side. This plan looks like it would solve the Irish Lane problem, but it doesn't really solve the where does the traffic go problem. The ways to get east and west are County M or the Beltline. There's not really a spot in between there, and I don't see anything in the, Nobel is going to wind all over the place just like Lacey does. If you do this to Irish, it will wind all over the place. So I don't know how that traffic is going to move.
Thank you.
So I was standing in line, but my question is essentially the same. What's the difference between, how is this any safer than what Irish and Sayin looks like right now? Right?
You can reserve enough space to design a road that would manage current and future projection of traffic versus you are kind of constrained if you didn't want to alter the existing trees that are along Irish and the current makeup of that road, so you can design it to function properly. Yeah, there's no other direction. So the idea is, does this actually make a good option to, you can put green space on each side of it at certain points, and it would be that main east-west connection that would relieve Irish Lane.
And would that look like 4 lanes, 2 lanes with some nice no trees? Like, what does that look like to you?
Well, a boulevard, that sounds beautiful, but the minimum that's required, I think, is where I bring it to the traffic engineers to evaluate. But it's likely more than 2 lanes if we are planning for total growth out 20, 30 years from now.
Yeah, I think that's the concern. There's a lot you can get done with 2 lanes, right? And I think Madison in general is moving towards alternative ways to transport oneself, right? And, you know, we talked about the bus line coming into Fitchburg. I forget who mentioned it, but I don't know that I'm more in favor of just bumping a 4-lane road, you know, through all these existing properties just because Irish is a problem today. Like, we have 2 lanes. Yes, there are trees. Why not work with the space that we have? There's plenty of places around the world that have 2-lane roads that you get a lot of people through, right? It doesn't, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
On that. I wouldn't say take it the Bible that it's going to be 4 lanes. The point being is, in this concept, it likely in the modeling would take the bulk of the traffic through this development and heading west. I'll let the traffic engineers say if we can achieve that with just 2 lanes. And I will say in a lot of cases, 3-lane with a twiddle, a center left turn lane, at worst case, is better than a 4-lane. But I'm not even saying that's even needed here. I'd like to work through the process to know that. But I understand your comments.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Hello. Sorry, just to make sure on that traffic. Can you go to the microphone? Yeah, I can. Just I guess the point I was trying to make is a lot of that traffic has nothing to do with the neighborhood. It's people from east and west trying to get past us, right? So making a plan for that to happen without turning Irish Lane into the Autobahn that we've been talking about. Sorry.
So I'm Mary Sue. I live on the Stoneman Farm, which has been interesting. With the McGaw Park plan, if you can see our farm is I don't know, I need a pointer again. Can you just outline our farm? So half of it is in the McGaw neighborhood, the gray. That's where Noble Drive goes through. And now the bottom half, we have a new road that's going through. And being on the steering committee, I've never seen that road before. This is all new to me, coming in and seeing this. So I'm a little surprised that that was kind of not run by the steering committee, or it's not, that we find out as a steering committee seeing that road. I'm trying to figure out in that pink area where my son and several other people live, how you're putting a road through their yards. Is that eminent domain? Are you, like, I don't understand. I think they're going to sell half of their yard to have the road and then live on either side of it. It doesn't make sense to me. So I really dislike that road, and I'm really unhappy that this is the first time I'm hearing about it.
Sure, yeah, I mean, in the bubble diagrams, it was connecting to Nobel, and it was discussions with staff from many departments on an option to think about how it impacts Irish, but noting that changes impacts north of there. And as Brad mentioned, this is just one concept, and sometimes you throw something on a wall and you get the reactions and you build from there. That's why this isn't supposed to be the final design. This is for further conversation. So I thank you for the comments, and there's more to the process. And so to the next steering committee meeting was the point of getting this neighborhood discussion, then having a survey of general public responding, and then even talking with Plan Commission and Council to get all opinions and build towards a more preferred option. But your statements are true that this wasn't presented previously, that exact concept. Sure. That's why we're here.
I appreciate all your efforts. I know you're trying to do what you do, but in my mind, looking forward, trying to develop a plan, just let this be and take those little development areas and pack them in to already developing areas north, and then add in your transportation needs and look forward to what transportation will look like, and try to keep this as green as possible and open and undeveloped. Take all that and put it into Madison, and then build a subway and build solid transportation and let all that be there, and let this area feed those people there as a concept. Like, make a map of that. Thank you.
I think one comment I'll still make, and I know I've probably sound like a broken record, is this plan is not saying that the lands have to change. If a owner decided to want to sell or develop themselves, that's why we're building this plan, is to have an understanding how it could be compatible with the neighborhood. So the land that it is now could remain as it is forever, but this is, if someone wants to actually build here, how can that be compatible? Now, could we be talking about taking these and actually showing even less development? That's part of this conversation. But two, I guess it'd be disservice for taxpayers paying us to do this evaluation if we don't even consider that someone might develop here. Personal opinion.
Right. I understand that, yeah. And I don't know if zoning could solve some of that, but I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm just giving you my thoughts, we have a crisis on this planet, and it's called too many people, too many places, doing too many things with too much free energy. And we have to address and look forward for our children and everybody else, and come up with a plan to be carbon neutral, carbon negative, and this is, well, there's a lot of people and we need to make housing for them. And I want to blow it up and be super creative and say, if we're going to use this for something, how can we do something awesome? Something really unimaginable, because that's the situation we're in as a planet, is that we need to do something awesome. And if we're going to be pumping out concrete, which emits CO2, and disturbing waterways, how can we go totally green? How can we be something as a role model for everybody else, I don't know what that is. Subways? I don't know. I mean, something awesome. Thank you.
Okay, I have a number of reactions. First, on the water issues mentioned, the Curry Court stormwater study was done about 2 years ago. I sent it off to Steve and people in the city. I think that needs to be reviewed, not from the standpoint of Steve and his MSA company, but from the standpoint of the city, and that not anything was really done or followed up. There was if we could just get this one landowner to do it, we can have a cheap solution and it will start to solve things. But as you can see, a number of people are still having problems with stormwater, still having issues with flooding, still very concerned about the water issues. So that's a city issue that needs to be followed up upon. In regards to these maps, I have to say, being on the steering committee, I thought we would be given more advanced notice to see what was actually going to be happening, because there's just a number of changes, and I appreciate you taking our input. But for instance, on the hatching, on the NMU on the south east corner of the map, I don't think that's even something we discussed. And I'm seeing some other things. The mixed use, there's some ideas for that, but again, that needs to be kind of discussed. And frankly, from what I was looking at on the hard maps, I mean, I know people that live there. There are houses there, and they may be on bigger lots, but there are houses there. It's not really agricultural. It's still single-family residential. I don't even know if they know that they're potentially wrapped up into this concept. So the impression that I'm giving is that this process is happening rather quickly. Some people would like to see it slow down a little bit more, have more of these meetings, more discussion. Having something on a Monday night, Fitchburg should have learned this, that it's not the best night to have people come in and give feedback on something, because for some reason, not a lot of people show up. A lot of people showed up tonight, thank you. But we could have even more, possibly, if we did it on a Saturday afternoon and gave more notice of the meetings and just broadcast it more. It's not like I'm trying to be difficult. I just think the process needs to be respected. I think there's a lot of different viewpoints, and to see this sort of wrapped up in 3 months concerns me, because there's already trust issues between the city and Greenfield already. And what needs to be addressed are those trust issues. We have newly elected alder. I think she needs to listen and get a handle on this. So I would encourage more meetings, and to kind of, don't drop something at a public meeting before you've run it past the steering committee meeting, because we can ask a lot of these questions and help prep you for them before it even gets to this point. So thank you for listening.
I understand that you've been hired to do a plan, and a plan will be developed. And I was also told before Swan Creek developed that if nobody decides to develop, nothing will change. Well, it did. The city changed through a FUTA, changed my land, my father's land at the time, from A1 exclusive to A transitional. And that triggered the developers, which just came flooding in. And the pressure went up, prices went up, and guess what? The farm went away. So to say that planning doesn't promote it is kind of silly, because it certainly can. May not be the intention, but it certainly can. I want to double up on what Mr. O'Brien said. We can redevelop what we have in the city, where there already is urban services. There's already bus service. We can redevelop those, and our zoning people, and Mr. Zimmerman also knows of some plans that are out there to redevelop some of the apartment complexes, which instead of a 2-story can be a 4-story or a 6-story or an 8-story. There's ways of doing it better than urban sprawl. And you don't have a plan for city bus service into the area we have, let alone the new area. And so it's all more cars. And there's EVs, and yeah, that can be explained away, but there's more cars and more traffic. And I think we can do a better job. Thank you.
Well, again, I mean, I think it was stated before we went into the concepts of the background of it being along the 14 corridor. I wouldn't call this urban sprawl with its current development just to the north here happening, but I can understand, and we've been trying to work with an idea of how we can build in that farmland and reduce some of the density, and I think I heard definitely about looking at more greenways as a possible direction, and even how could this be something that we can hold up as a unique scenario that other communities could do. So we're going to continue looking at this. I do appreciate everyone staying even past 7 if you knew it was supposed to maybe end at 7, but I will stick around for another 15, 20 minutes if you want to provide additional comments on there and talk to us individually. So I appreciate your time. Again, a public open house is happening on May 7th, so we'll be having the same conversation with the larger notifications and out to the general public as well as a survey. So this is just one step in the process. We're not going to be done in 3 months, I think was mentioned. This process is going to run to the end of the year, if not into next year. But the land use portion is something that we're trying to figure out in the next few months. But that doesn't mean it won't get altered by what we learn from engineering and future meetings on this topic. So again, appreciate your time, taking your time out on Mondays, which understand now that's not a great day here. We'll look at that in the future. So again, appreciate your time. If you want more information, it's on the website. You can use that QR code to get there.
Will those two concepts be on the website?
I'll put them up.
Yep.
Yep.